Started. Okay, guys. Our topic today is on client engagement. As a lot of you probably know, there was a situation in Whitfield County a month or so ago where a child passed away because of just some bad conditions in the home, and there had been a provider involved, and it just really sparked some um, need and interest for us to do a little bit of training around client engagement. The population we work with can be very, very challenging sometimes, just because a lot of people have been burned by the system. A lot of people are skeptical. There's not a lot of information sometimes. And so we're going to talk a little bit through what some of the barriers are to client engagement, what client engagement actually looks like, and how we can do a good job at it. We're not going to get everybody. It's not going to always be perfect, but there are some things that we can be doing. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to share my screen with you guys here. Here we go. All righty. So maybe if it'll go, there we go. All righty. So what we're going to talk through today is engaging the skeptical client. And I titled it this because I do think sometimes we run across that skeptical client who's not really sure what's happening, who this person is that's coming into their home, and so forth. So we're going to talk a little bit through that and what that looks like. The problem for us with client engagement really boils down to disengagement and stigma, partly just for a very disengaged culture. On some level, we want to do things on our own. We want to kind of stay in our own lane and not, we don't want other people to tell us what to do and things like that. But according to NAMI, it says many people who seek mental health care drop out, and 70% that drop out do so after their first or second visit. As that's a high amount that drop out after their first or second visit. So that means something's not getting done in the very beginning that caused these folks to drop out. Also, there we go. People might feel betrayed or labeled by the system. You guys, we've all run across those people who feel like they've been labeled in a certain way as crazy or as, helpless, or that there's no hope for them, things like that, or maybe that they've tried to seek services or tried to access them before, and the system hasn't really followed through for them. And that can be challenging because those folks who don't have resources available to them everywhere they turn, they try the one avenue that's available and then they get burned. There might be a lack of resources or education. Sometimes folks just don't know what mental health services are. Sometimes people are unaware of what we can provide to them or what any provider can provide to them, and how it works. Or some folks just think that we're part of a greater system. I've had a lot of clients think that I'm DFAX, and I have to explain to them that I'm not DFAX. I'm not there to take their kids away. And that can be really challenging, particularly when there's a lack of trust for certain parts of the system. And then you guys all know there's some stigma associated with mental health and seeking mental health treatment. Some statistics I got from the CDC were that 57% of all adults believe that people are caring and sympathetic to persons with mental illness. That's only about half, and that's pretty low. And then only 25% of adults with mental health symptoms believe that people are caring and sympathetic to persons with mental illnesses. So, we've got broadly 57%, but then only 25% of those who actually have the mental health symptoms believe that people are caring and sympathetic. That's even lower. And those are the people that we want to believe that people are caring and sympathetic towards them. So when you guys get this presentation, you'll be able to follow this link down here to access the resources. So let's define client engagement a little bit. What client engagement is the strengths-based process through which individuals with mental health conditions form a healing connection with people that support their recovery and wellness within the context of family, culture, and community. So a couple things to emphasize. It is strength-based. We're supporting recovery and wellness through that healing connection. And then there's context that's involved. There's family, culture, community. And we're going to look at all these different aspects throughout our presentation today. These are a couple of quotes that I got from this NAMI. This NAMI thing that I'm citing here, the link to it is in the very end. It's a really, really good report on engagement. It was put out last year, and it's really about a culture paradigm shift for mental health care and how different people have had different experiences. It was really, really valuable in putting this together. But these are a couple of quotes that I pulled out of there. It's a two-way process that includes a determination to never give up on the person. It has multiple dimensions and must embrace the whole person. In the context of family, language, culture, and community, as most of you guys know, with integrated healthcare or integrated care in Georgia Hope, we're looking at that whole person. So this is just one more thing to add in with that, as we're considering the whole person and who they are in the context of their mental health, physical health, their social health, their engagement with others and family, culture, community. And it goes beyond traditional medical goals of symptom reduction. And what we look at more is wellness, connection to family, friends, community, faith, school, work. A lot of things to be considering. Okay. Couple things, what client engagement is not. David's gonna like this first one. It's not compliance. As you guys know, we're trying to shift away from this idea of non-compliance. What we're looking at instead is client participation rooted in respect, compassion, and centered around the individual's life goal. We want to look at how our clients participating and engaging in their own services versus whether they're complying with a certain treatment plan, because the idea there is that we are setting things for them to do and they have to do them. Rather, when we talk about client engagement, we want to look at a more collaborative approach. It's not manipulation. We're not, doing compulsory or involuntary treatment. We may be selling services to them, and this idea of healing and hope and recovery. Sometimes we have to sell hope. Sometimes we're the only ones that have that for them. However, we want to make sure that we are looking towards, what can we do with the person rather than what does the person need to do to reach our goals for them. Let me just do this here real quick. Sorry. I think this is going to pull me out of the presentation. Sorry, guys. All right. Come on. All right. There we go. All right. So we're going to look at why client engagement matters. So first, without client engagement, we're less likely to see collaboration. So couple things we want to consider in this article here, there's a full reference at the end for you guys to access if you'd like, but they should be respected in the process of their recovery. And sometimes a little understanding can go a whole long way. Just having a little bit of understanding for where the person is and where they're coming from can really, really do a lot for beginning services. A client and therapist may be more able to use the client's early expectations to shape the course of therapy towards more successful treatment outcome. And so being able to work together and use those clients' expectations, we can really move together as a team towards the client's goals rather than towards our goals for them. The next thing is we're going to work smarter, not harder. Anyone who's heard me doing a training knows this is my mantra. That's my goal. I always want to work smarter, not harder. I want to be able to get things done in a smart way. And that's true for you and for the client. So by engaging them the first time they present to services prevents us and them from doing the work twice. How many of you guys have had that intake that you've done, and then 3 months later they get referred again and you do another intake and then they never follow through with services, and then 3 months later you do another intake? That's frustrating. There's a lot of work that goes into that. So a little bit of understanding on the front end and engaging that person in services keeps us from having to do the work over and over and over again. Oops, not really sure why that happened. And then higher levels of client and practitioner satisfaction. Research shows that clients' perception of their choice, agency, and respect in their treatment does link to higher satisfaction outcomes. And that's also true for clinicians. Higher engagement is higher satisfaction with outcomes. So, a couple more things, why client engagement matters. So negative outcomes like attrition, perpetuated stigma, negative outcomes, attrition, and perpetuated stigma. We don't have client engagement, then these are the things that we see. The clients who aren't engaged appropriately, they might leave with inaccurate views of mental health treatment. So if we don't engage them well from the start, sometimes folks will assume negative things or assume inaccurate things about services, and then clients may not seek services for themselves in the future. And then a really big one is safety issues, and that's again what prompted our whole discussion around client engagement. But without engagement, clients might not be honest about their safety problems. They might not trust the clinician or the CSS enough to be able to say, yes, I'm thinking about hurting myself, or I'm really struggling with, cravings for substances right now, and that's hard for me. They might not be honest. That can result in increased crises and hospitalizations. So then we have folks go to the hospital more, ending up at the ER more, and that disrupts engagement in services too, because there's no consistency. Clients might refuse services even when they're needed, resulting in severe consequences, and can lead to significant liability issues. And that's not the thing we want to focus on, but it is a reality. So, all right, I'm going to pause here for just a second. Are there any questions that folks have about what we're talking about? Questions about the consequences, anything like that? Okay, I just wanted to check in and pause really quick to make sure that folks didn't have any questions. Okay, we're going to move on. Share my screen with you again. Okay, if it'll let me continue on. There we go. So a couple of barriers to engagement for the client. The first is stigma associated with mental health problems, and we've addressed this a little bit already, but this is in the community at large or even with the family or cultural system. Those of us who are clinicians typically have some sort of social and cultural class in graduate school, and paraprofessional staff, you guys probably have encountered this as well, is this idea that not everybody believes the same way we do. And that's hard, particularly when we go in with certain assumptions and then we have clients who come in with different assumptions because of culture, and we don't realize that they're there. That's really, really important. It can be a huge barrier to engagement in services. And so sometimes even just asking questions about how do they feel about having a therapist in the home? How do they feel about being referred for services? And how can we support and break down some of those barriers can be really important. Past experiences. I'm certain that each of you have probably heard someone say, well, I have this one counselor sometime and she did blah, 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 or he was this way and this way and this way. And I just don't ever trust anybody anymore because of how they did. And then we have to spend all this time repairing those relationships. That can be hard. Sometimes folks have really bad experiences with involuntary or voluntary psychiatric hospitalizations. I really like this quote. This is from that NAMI report again. It says, when our family members are held hostage by these moments, those symptoms, how do we keep them safe for the next days, weeks, or months? How will we wrestle with those shared demons to the ground and engage? And I liked this because it makes us think about, when clients or when individuals don't engage in their own mental health care, then they're kind of left to their own devices. And that can be hard for them and their family members and things like that. And so client engagement is key because we want to make sure that we're engaging these folks in what they need so we can support them and their families. And then sometimes past experience with law enforcement, there were some stories in that NAMI report about people being shackled and put in the back of a cop car because of certain symptoms and things like that. And we know that there's huge statistics on the population of mental health issues that are present in our jails today. Just a sheer lack of understanding. I mentioned this before, who we are and what we're there to do versus who they think we are. We're just probation, or we're just DFACs, or we're just whoever. We just do this for a job and we do it for the money. We need to provide information about, the focus of our services is on the person that we're there to help. And then mental health symptoms. Sometimes the symptoms that people are seeking treatment for themselves can get in the way. Someone who's depressed and can't get out of bed, that can make it really, really hard for them to engage. Someone who's very hopeless can be very challenging. There's a variety of things that can get in the way. I found this very interesting list of clinician characteristics that limit client engagement. And just I don't want anyone to think that I'm accusing people of having these characteristics, but sometimes it's just something to think about, that these things, these barriers, this way that we present ourselves sometimes can get in the way of engaging our clients. First, an inability or unwillingness to use creative and innovative approaches to engagement. Second, like a deficits-based rather than strengths-based orientation. So this idea that we're trying to stop something from happening, rather than, or that they don't have something that they need to have that we can bring and provide to them because we have the magic answer, versus how can we help the individual utilize the strengths that they already have to be more successful in their own life. An inability to work effectively within and across diverse cultures, so kind of staying in our own little box. Rigid adherence to program rules and regulations, and not talking about policy and procedure here, but this idea of you have to do this specific thing this way, or you can't have, services. There are different things. Yes, we have to adhere to the policies and procedures of the agency, but there are some other things that we can have flexibility on. Lack of respect for individuals and families. That's a big one, particularly when we're going into the home. And an inability to convey a sense of hope for recovery and achieving life goals. You guys will just give me 1 second here. That's awesome, Jenny. I love that. I played cards with a kid the other day too, and then I had to leave, and he told me I didn't play with him long enough. So I promised him that next time I wouldn't talk to mom and dad, and we would just play cards the whole time. So, this sweetie. All right. Back to our presentation. Okay. Some other barriers to engagement for the provider. I didn't want to forget us because these things are true. Sometimes large caseloads can get in the way. Practical barriers, authorization, time frame, insurance. How many of us have had someone go inactive for insurance and we can't go see them, but people don't understand why we can't go see them? Suspended for diagnosis, things like that. Those things can be very, very detrimental to engaging clients, but there's not always anything we can do about them. And so that can be very challenging. Lack of self-care leading to compassion fatigue and burnout. Rachel did a great presentation on compassion fatigue a while back, and that's available on our YouTube channel. If you notice yourself getting worn out and burnt out, I would really encourage you to spend some time to look at that and see ways that you can take care of yourself. Labeling clients, that crazy person, or he's just a defiant kid, he's never going to amount to anything, things like that. When we start to label our clients in negative lights, that can really keep us from engaging them, because we lose sight of the person and just begin to look at the symptoms. And a focus on paperwork and protocol rather than the person. Paperwork and protocol are important, please don't hear me wrong. However, our jobs don't amount to paperwork and protocol only. And so while we have to do those necessary components and we have to follow those policies and procedures, we still are working with people, not numbers. And so it's really important when we're engaging with our clients and the individuals in the community that we're respecting them and such. So we're going to talk now about removing barriers to client engagement. So these are all the problems. These are all the things that we face on a daily basis, or that clients face. How do we break them down? First, share information and decision making. So we want to support folks as active participants in their care. We want to allow them to choose who they want involved in their services, family, friends, and other supports. This begins from the start. This is something that we see at intake already. Let's say that we're doing an intake on an individual and they want their spouse to be present in the room so that they can help provide information for care, or just even provide some moral support, because it's scary if they're there by themselves. That's okay. Let's just make sure we have the right documentation for it. We want to share information about what we're doing. We want to provide a narrative about what you're doing while you're doing the assessment. Okay, now this is the part where we're going to talk through this. This is what I'm putting in the computer. This is how we're doing this, pulling this information together. All those things are really helpful. And then when it comes to decision making, like on services and things that we're going to provide, make sure that the client is fully involved in that process. We want to shape services and supports around life goals and interests, okay? Not what other people want them to do, but what does the person have as a goal for themselves for their life? What are they interested in? This ties back a lot to the idea of strengths to build, or strengths that can be engaged as supports in a client's services. Maybe they're great at music, or maybe they love playing basketball with their kids. Those tools can be super helpful in coming up with goals and interventions and objectives for our clients. Um, a person's sense of wellness and connection may be more vital than reducing symptoms and might be the way to reducing symptoms. That's why we want to maintain this positive focus. The idea here is sensitive empathic identification and acknowledgement of the client's concerns. We want to let them know that we understand where they're coming from and where they want to be, and that we're going to be there with them in the whole process. Also, we want to encourage you to take risks and be adaptable to meet individuals where they are, but also to recognize your limitations. Not every single one of us has specialized training in addiction. Not every single one of us has specialized training in trauma or specialized training in eating disorders, et cetera, et cetera. We want to make sure that while we're willing to learn and be adaptable to meet folks where they are, because that's important. And so sometimes accessing those people who do have those specializations in that training to get more information, it can be really, really helpful. And letting a client know, I need to do a little research on that so that we can really get some more understanding together is okay. But we also need to recognize our limitations. We don't prescribe medications, but our psychiatrists do. And so we want to make sure that they get a referral for that, and so on and so forth. Does that make sense? Okay. Couple more things on removing barriers to client engagement. We want to communicate hope. For those who feel hopeless, hold hope for them until they experience it themselves. I have said this many times to folks. I know you don't have hope right now, but that's okay. That's my privilege. I get the opportunity to bring this hope in here, and I will hold it for as long as you need me to until you're willing or able to take on a little bit of yourself, and then we'll keep bringing more and more of it into our sessions. Sometimes just knowing that someone is bringing hope into the environment can be a really helpful thing for our clients. Treat people with respect and dignity. We want to look beyond the person's condition to see the whole person. This is something I've mentioned a couple of times so far. Also use a strengths-based approach to assessment and services. We want to recognize the strengths and inner resources of the individuals and families we work with. So again, this is another quote from that NAMI report saying, says, don't generalize about people based on their symptoms and mental health issues. Figure out what their goals are and what they want to do in life. Then cheer them on and tell them that it's possible. Listen to their whole story and cheer them on. I love this. I've told some of my teenagers that I work with that I'm like their cheerleader. They look at me like I'm crazy. But I think most teenagers look at me like I'm crazy, but that's okay. I share with them that, I'm here to cheer them along. We're going to help them be successful because that's what they want for themselves. So how do we get that? And how can I support them and encourage them in that process? I'm going to challenge them, and I'm going to challenge them to do more and to bring more energy and to bring more things to the plate. But I'm also not going to say, oh, well, you're angry all the time, and so you can't do this. Or, oh, well, you're depressed, so you're not going to be able to do this. I'm going to encourage them to try and meet their goals, and we'll get there together. We want to recognize that readiness can build up over time. Folks aren't always going to be willing to dive into their trauma from when they were a child in the very first session. That's okay. And so we want to remember that sometimes we have to start little. And if we can identify that one seed of a thing that folks are willing to really, really focus on from the very beginning, you ask them, well, what is it that you really, really want to see change? And there's something big they want to see change. Okay, great. But they don't have the hope that that'll happen. Okay, well, what is it that you think could change first? And just start small. And once they have that small success and that small accomplishment, working towards goals. Sometimes it's not what you think it's going to be, and that's okay. We want to find out what they're willing to engage in now. We also want to find out what barriers are keeping the client from being ready. And then how can we work with that client to break down the barriers? And check your language. This is something that can be really, really hard, particularly for those of us who kind of are around folks who speak our language, so to speak, that kind of psychobabble. a lot, and we get stuck in that. And so we go out to our clients' homes and we start explaining these things, and they look at this with this glazed over look, and they're like, I don't think I can do this because it's too much. We want to make sure that we meet them where they are and be patient with explanations. If you have to explain something 5 times, that's okay. This means you might need to change how you're explaining it. Use person first language. So things like, she struggles with depression rather than that depressed woman. And then ask yourself, would I want someone to talk about me that way? It's a really big deal. If you're talking about a client or staffing a client, would you want someone to talk about you that way? And if not, maybe you shouldn't be talking about them that way, because likely someone can overhear you, and that might challenge the way or change the way they think about getting their own health services. All right, I'm going to pause for just a second. Any questions? So David mentioned about engaging clients and sharing with them about how we're there to help them with overall wellness. All right, if there's no questions, I'm going to keep moving on. All righty. So this topic is just brief, but it's the idea of engaging families in treatment for children. Obviously, if we're working with anybody that we have in our services, there's a family somewhere. But this is particularly salient when we're working with families and we're working with children. So a couple things to think through. It'll let me go. Okay. So why do we want to do this? The first is because children don't live in a vacuum. Clearly, they don't live by themselves. If they do, then we need to make a defects report. And often the family is part of current stressors for the child. So whether it be there's change in the family system, or there's a lot of chaos in the family system, whatever might be going on, often that we see that, not always, but often we see some stress in the family system. Children learn from their parents and other family members, and then impacting the system often results in lasting change for the child. It's this idea of, if you heat something up in the microwave and then you put it in the refrigerator, the thing that you heated up in the microwave is going to return to the temperature of the refrigerator. But if you heat something up in the microwave and you put it in a warm oven, then it's going to return to the temperature of the oven. If you want to keep it warm, you want to keep it there. So the change that we make with these children, we want to be perpetuating that change in the family as well. Couple barriers. Time constraints and family schedules. We know the families we work with have very challenging schedules sometimes, between jobs and some of the things that kids that we work with do, or even just adults, when they are stretched with multiple children, they might have a lot of different things to do. Lack of awareness on how family impacts the child, or just a general lack of understanding. Apathy, sometimes apathy because they're just so stressed out about everything else that the last thing they want to think about is adding one more thing. Lack of knowledge on how to engage families for the provider. So maybe we don't know how to engage the family, and then unclear goals or objectives. So either from the family's perspective or from our perspective. So a couple suggestions on how to engage families in services for children. Offer support to the parents and validate them. So a couple suggestions here on how you might say that. It seems that you're trying to do this, manage your child's mental health symptoms all by yourself, and I can imagine that's exhausting. I wonder if there's a way we can support you too as we work with Susie individually. And just letting the parent know that you see how incredibly exhausting and overwhelming that could be for them to manage that on their own. A little bit of understanding can go a very long way. Another thing can be to provide education. So how the family can support or cause stress for the child. So, these are the things that you can do that will help Susie, but these are the things that you're doing that are really challenging for Susie and seem to make this worse. How change in the family system can cause lasting change for the child. Even using that example of the microwave that I shared a minute ago. Sharing with our clients, this is how, when we do things in the family and in the home, they can impact the work that I'm doing with Susie all by herself. So we need to make sure we're doing this here too. Reassure them. A couple things. That you're not there to challenge their values on parenting. They might not have the same values as you. That you're not there to tell them they're a horrible parent or grandparent for that matter. We have a lot of kids who are raised by grandparents. And so, they've done this before and they were not expecting to be parent again. That's a lot. So we're not there to tell them that they're a horrible person, but we are there to support and encourage them to be the best parent that they can be. How can we support you to be the best person that you can be? Whether it be by providing them parenting skills, working on their relationship with their child, or even referring to them for their own. Okay. All right. So, a couple tools for engagement. The first one that we're going to talk about is collaborative documentation. And the reason that we're talking about collaborative documentation here is because this is one of the ultimate ways that we've seen to truly engage a client in their own services through the process of helping them participate in their documentation and know how things are being written, how things are being documented, what goals and objectives and things are being set forth for them or with them, I guess I should say. So collaborative documentation defined is the process of involving the client in the documentation of services provided during treatment. So this is not just in therapy or CSS work. This is also in the context of the assessment. The vast majority, if not all of our assessors, utilize collaborative documentation during the assessment, engaging the person in developing their IRP and in sharing information throughout the BHA. Hello, there we go. So a couple benefits. First, it actively engages the clients in all aspects of their care. So it's not just what we do here is for you to know, but what I do on my paperwork is not for you to know. It gives the clients responsibility for guiding their treatment. So when you're talking about planning for your next session, what do you want to work on next? What do you think a good direction to go would be? And working together with that. Ensures accuracy of the clinical record. You get immediate feedback from the client. I can't tell you how many times I've asked, a teenager, so what did you learn today? What did you get out of today? And what I thought they got out of today is not what they actually got out of the day. Sometimes what they got out of the day is way more profound than what I thought they got out of it. And sometimes there's some lack of understanding, and that's you can use time for clarification there. It increases your efficiency while also decreasing out of session time needed for documentation, which in my opinion is like the best thing about collaborative documentation. But client engagement is really good. Okay, a couple more tips on collaborative documentation. So how your client responds to the use of collaborative documentation is going to depend on how it's presented to them. And we're going to talk through a couple ways of how to present it to them. So a couple key points of how you can share this with them. First is to emphasize the client's importance in the process. 2 is to explain collaboration. 3, explain parts of the note, and it's okay to disagree. So one thing that I'll explain to folks is why I have my computer out when I'm meeting with them, because I do primarily therapy. And so I'll say, I know you'll notice that I have my computer out, and so I want you to see it's not connected to the internet. I'm not playing games or answering emails or anything while I'm meeting with you. So I'm actually writing a few things down so that I remember what we talked about, so that when we meet next time, I have a foundation of where we've kind of come from. And I'll go through, this is what's written here. And I have some kids who like to come and look over my shoulder while I'm writing. A lot of them can't read, but they think it's cool to watch. But then I have some folks who don't even want to see it but will work with me through the process of saying, all right, well, tell me a little bit about what we did today, or tell me a little bit about what we're learning about now. There's a lot of different ways to do collaborative documentation, but the idea is we want to emphasize the fact that our clients are fully present and engaged in the services that we're providing to them. If they feel like we're holding something secret over here, they're going to be less trusting and less likely to fully engage. So here's the sample script. I'm not going to read through this because it's pretty long. But the idea here is this is just a tool for you guys to be able to use while you're setting the stage for clients. Maybe if you're not so sure about collaborative documentation, you're not really sure how to use it or how to set it up for your clients, this might be a good suggestion. Again, this will be provided to you guys later. Couple things to think about. Collaborative documentation is actually an intervention. And so we can actually note that when we use this as an intervention, it's used to actually increase client engagement. That's its purpose. We want to make sure we're reviewing feedback, getting some client feedback, and documenting progress, as well as clarifying goals of treatment. So here's another example of how you might document an intervention for collaborative documentation. Now, be sure that when you're documenting collaborative documentation, it's a little redundant, but you will document it as an intervention, but there also has to be evidence that you actually used it. So we always want to make sure that's there, because as we're engaging clients, we want to make sure that when they participate in something, we're really showing how they're participating in it. Not just for our purposes, but also for other folks, like if your client gets transitioned or things like that, that way folks can know how to engage the client even better. A couple of things about how to use it. First is to plan ahead. One of the things I like to do is set up my notes so that it has the goal and objective at the very beginning of the, or all the goals and objectives up at the top of the document, and then I save it for that client individual, and I save it by their last name, first initial on my computer, and it's all password protected. And so that way, by planning ahead, I have all of their goals and objectives set there for me, and when I meet with a client, if we're not really sure what direction to go that day, I can say, okay, well, these are your goals. Like, what's something you really want to be working towards right now? Oh, you don't feel like any of those goals are appropriate? Well, maybe we need to spend some time talking about what goals you really feel like are appropriate for you to be working towards. And that can spark a conversation right there that can be very, very helpful for the client and fully engaging them in their services. You want to make sure you're documenting as if your client may read the note and use language that clients can understand. This goes back to your checking your language. Make sure that when you're documenting, it's using language that you would feel comfortable with the client reading, as well as verbiage that the clients can understand. Now, some of it's going to be clinical language, and that's okay. But you want to make sure that they can understand the majority of it. We want to use client quotes as appropriate. And then document differences of opinion when necessary. So if you see something and maybe challenged a discrepancy, but the client doesn't see it that way, that's okay to document things like that. Sometimes to use it in session would be to do it as an interactive wrap-up exercise, or you can do it throughout the session. I've done both. It really just depends on who I'm using it with. And then be consistent. When you choose a strategy, stick with it, because that is the best way to get better at it. It's not easy in the beginning. And I shared with somebody the other day, I didn't like collaborative documentation in the beginning because it's hard. But as time went on and I continued to work at it more, what I've noticed is my clients are much more engaged in reviewing and understanding their material, and that they're going over in sessions and the progress that they're making. I'm actually really excited to say, okay, well, this is what I learned today, and this is the progress that I'm making. Let's put that down. And they get really excited about it, which I think is cool. I like it when my clients get excited about the work they're doing. Couple things. When it might not be appropriate to use collaborative documentation would be, one, if a client specifically declines its use. So if you have someone who says, no, I do not want you to use it, that's okay. We just want to make sure we're documenting that. And then it may not be appropriate in crisis situations. Sometimes it is, sometimes it's not. It just depends on the situation. So, all right. Okay, couple more tools. And again, if you guys have questions, please feel free to kind of pop them in that Q&A section up there. My computer's not, there we go. So this is area approach. This approach is a tool that is in the orientation manual. I think I really copied and pasted the whole thing in here. So all the material from it is right here for you. But this is something that's provided just about how to engage our clients fully. But the first words of the bullets spell out the word area. And so the first is appreciation of the skills, talents, and unique perspective that the person brings to the table. Okay. I've learned a whole lot of very interesting things from my clients just because I spend time saying, well, tell me. I always ask them the question, tell me what's the most interesting thing about you that I never would have guessed. And it's always fun to see what people come up with. Second is recognition of the added value of the person's unique perspective. So because they have the perspective and that unique perspective that they bring to the table, how does that add value to your services? How does that add value to the counseling work that you're going to be doing with them? One thing we encourage folks to say is, my goal is to help you deal with life better. And it's dealing with life better, whatever that looks like for you. I'm not trying to turn you into a mini me or a mini your mom or whoever it might be, but how do you want to deal with life, and how do we help you do that better? You want to explore the unique aspects of the person's story, including seeking more information and understanding. Hearing a person's story can be one of the most valuable things that you do when it comes to client engagement. And truly being curious and interested in what they share with you can make all the difference. It's like we said before, a little bit of understanding can go a very long way. And understanding that story and providing a client with an opportunity to be heard can really set the stage for that trust and engagement that clients can have in our services. And then an agreement to work with the person around the real capacities and areas for further work. So what are the things that they are capable of doing? What are the areas that they really want to work on? And then what are some areas that we can work some more on? How can we build up their strengths or potentials in those areas? A couple different notes. You want to make sure you're open to establishing a common goal. We've heard that. That's been a theme throughout our training today. Your job is to gather information, not tell them what to do. That goes back to this idea of, we're not there to tell people that they're horrible parents or question their values on parenting. We're not there to change that, but we're there to work with them towards the common goal. And then connections are a very potent intervention in and of themselves. You guys know how hard it is when you don't connect with someone, really feel like you can help and support them. That can be really challenging. And so we want to strive to be able to have that connection with those folks that we're working with. Okay. So this last tool for client engagement is motivational interviewing. So there is a whole lot of information that I have over these next couple of slides, and I would love to do an in-depth training on motivational interviewing. I'm not credentialed in motivational interviewing, but these are some tools that I wanted to be able to provide to you guys to think through, just a way to engage folks and questions that you can ask that really help clients to see that we want to understand more of where they're coming from and that they are valuable in and of themselves as they participate in services class or whatever they're participating in on a daily basis. And so there are some tools that I'm going to provide to you over these next couple of slides. I want you to know this is not a comprehensive motivational interviewing training at all. And yeah, so that's my disclaimer. So one thing to think about is when we're engaging clients and really wanting to motivate them to fully participate in their own services or work towards bettering themselves is to ask open-ended questions. So this is like nothing that can be answered as a simple yes or no. So this chart, yes, I understand it's visually overwhelming. But what this chart shows, and the reference is up here for where you can find it. This is actually a book that's available from the National Institute of Health. It's quite interesting. It's got a lot of information on motivational interviewing if you want to do some research of your own. It looks at, and it's focused on addiction, but it looks at here like, how many children do you have versus tell me about your family. You're going to get a lot more information and show a lot more interest in who the person is by asking a question of tell me about your family rather than how many children do you have. And so, going through here, again, these are mostly targeted towards substance use, but these kinds of questions can be rephrased or used differently for any person dealing with any symptoms. So, how many days per week do you sleep in because you're so depressed versus tell me a little bit about how depression affects you on an average week. There can be a variety of things that we can ask. And by asking those open-ended questions, we give more opportunity for the client to share their own story. The next thing is reflective listening. This is the idea of you basically not parroting back to the client what they're saying, but reflecting back to them what they say. So if they say, just so much, I don't know how I'm going to go on. There's too many things, going on for me right now. It's just more than I can handle. Saying back to them, it sounds like you're really overwhelmed right now and there's a lot going on. I wonder how you're dealing with that, and helping them to think through and letting them know that you understand. Sometimes we want to elicit what we call self-motivational statements. And there's a slide on that in just a couple slides, I think. But this idea of how is the client changing and how do they want to continue to change? We can reflect back to them, oh, it sounds like you've really done a good job on this. I only got to the gym 2 days this week. I wish I could have gotten there more. Wow, it sounds like you've made a lot of progress on getting to the gym. You've gone 2 days this week than you did, a month ago you weren't going at all. That's really awesome. And so by reflecting those things back to them, we can help them develop some motivational statements. Reframing. We want to place a different meaning on what the person says so that the person doesn't seem so resistant. Sometimes our clients are like, I don't need this. This is stupid. I don't need to talk to anybody. Okay. That's a valid feeling and a valid perspective, but sometimes coming back and saying, wow, it sounds like you are really angry that your probation officer felt like you needed counseling. Tell me a little bit about that. By reframing that and changing it around to say, I can hear that anger that's coming out in what you're doing, or this is so stupid, I don't feel like I need this, my probation officer making me do it. Well, it sounds like you're really motivated to follow those requirements for your probation. Let's talk a little bit about how we can help you do that. And the assumption is the client wants to improve themselves. The client wants to get to a better place for themselves because we all want to better ourselves. And so by joining alongside the person that's engaging in our services and reframing those things that we feel often are pushback, we can help them with that. Developing discrepancy. This is this idea of a person wants to get better, but they're still engaging in a negative behavior. So you say you want to get a full-time job, but you're staying up late and partying every night and then sleeping in until 4 p.m. That's going to be really hard for you. Let's talk a little bit about this discrepancy and how, what needs to be different. And the client can present that argument for change. How can they change that? What is it that they need to do to be different? These two things don't really match up. What are we going to do? Verbalizing ambivalence. So a couple things to ask here would be, in what ways have your behavior been a problem? What have other people said? If you don't think that you have a problem right now, how might what you're doing eventually become a problem? Some folks don't believe that they have a problem, and that's okay. But let's talk about how it could become a problem, because we don't want that to happen. Or in what ways has it been inconvenient for you? Sometimes it's just really hard to view that you even have a problem. But we can at least maybe talk about, well, what's it done that maybe has been inconvenient? Things like that. And then recognizing that ambivalence. And so it's the same thing here. What are the good things about your behavior? What are the less good things about your behavior? And so this idea that, there are payoffs sometimes for symptoms or behaviors that could be perceived by others as negative. The kid who gets into fistfights with his brother, you can acknowledge that he doesn't like getting in trouble, but he keeps doing it. So what's working? Why are you doing that in terms of how is it helping you? Well, it gets mommy and daddy to spend some time with me, or it gets my brother to leave me alone, or I get put in the corner where it's quiet and I finally get some quiet and time to myself. There's plenty of things. And so getting that information can be really helpful to engage the client in, okay, well, what if we can help you find those things in a better way? Maybe in a way where you don't get in trouble, or, these fist fights make it really hard for you to get along with your brother. So how can we work through that together? Looking forward. So looking at, if you keep doing what you're doing, where might you be in the future? And where do you want to be? What do you want for yourself? What's important to you? And sometimes just looking forward to where the person wants to be can engage them in this idea of, well, those are things that we can help you get for sure. And really gives us an opportunity to engage our clients in identifying their goals and their hopes for themselves, because it is a very hopeful approach. Elaborating. And this leads back to those open-ended questions, this idea of, wow, tell me a little bit more about that. Tell me something about your family, and they might share something with you. Tell me a little bit more about how that's worked out for you. This made me laugh. It's called the Columbo technique, but this goes back to that too, that identifying discrepancies. This, you're telling me this one thing and this one thing, and how do we make these two things fit together? Therapeutic paradox. I use this on occasion when a client's like, well, I don't know if I could do that. I'm like, well, you're probably not going to be able to do it. Thing to be careful about that is that you are picking the right people to use that with. I'm being very careful. This is more of an advanced technique, something that maybe you want to research with talk through in supervision a little bit more. It's this idea of giving your client a challenge. It's like, I don't know if you can do it or not. I mean, it could be really hard, and kind of push that. You don't want to be sarcastic, but you want to be genuinely, okay, how do we challenge you and push you enough to get this one thing accomplished? And some people see it as a challenge. Other people see it as defeatist, and so you want to make sure that you're selecting the right clients to do that with. I have one client in particular that responds very, very well to this, and we've made a lot of progress because I kind of pushed this piece of, well, I mean, you can try it. We'll see what happens. And he has made huge, huge changes in his life because of it. And he's so excited every time he comes back and says, look what I did. Look what I did. This is so awesome. And then we can celebrate together in the accomplishments that he made. And then emphasizing personal choice and control is a huge, huge, huge part of client engagement. When you tell someone what to do, it's confrontational and fosters resistance that pushes against each other. But instead, if we can have choice and control, we begin to work alongside someone else, and we can work together. Okay, and this is the resource for the motivational interviewing stuff we talked through. This is actually a Word document and is available to you. This is the self-motivational statements example, and it's just some questions that you can ask that will help folks identify some of the self-motivational statements. So these are resources and references. This is, again, an article that I used. This is that book that I referenced on the National Institute of Health, our Georgia Hope Orientation Manual. These are two NAMI resources. This first one is the engagement report that I referenced. This is an amazing report. It talks even more in depth about client engagement, the problem of disengagement and why it's occurring and how we can fully engage folks. It's a wonderful, very well written resource. Then this here is a resource from NAMI that focuses on breaking down stigmas, and it talks through mental health by the numbers. It's actually could be a really good tool for you engaging clients who maybe feel like they're weird or crazy or in the minority because they have certain mental health problems, and it talks through the statistics. It's got some really cool infographics on it, and can be a really, really good tool. I would highly recommend it. You look at it and potentially use it to share with your clients. This is that document that I referenced, and this is another article that I used. So that's all I have for the PowerPoint presentation. We've got just a few minutes left. What questions or comments do people have? Is there anything that you guys use that you find is really helpful for engaging clients? I want to make sure that we're sharing that with each other. No. All right, so best tool is empowering the client that this is their treatment and they do have a choice. Yeah, I think that is huge, letting folks know that they have a choice and that's their, opportunity to engage. And David mentioned engagement starts from the very beginning of the process. That's huge. Our assessors, this is a challenge for our assessors kind of coming into service when we, show up and that's the first person they're seeing. That can be hard. And so some of these tools can be very, very helpful, particularly when we get to the goals and developing the IRP. What do you want to do? Well, I just want DFACs to get off my back. Okay, that's cool. So how do we help DFACs get out of the picture? Like, what do you think you could do that would be beneficial to you and help DFACs get out of the picture or help you get off probation, whatever it might be? Sometimes that's the main motivation for our clients. Ooh, I like that, David. This idea that helping the client see that they have value and that's not based on their behavior. That's really good. Thank you so much for sharing that. Um, a lot of our clients are amounted and boiled down to their behaviors and the things that they do, and they become labeled. That's where that labeling comes in. And so seeing them as a whole person, that's huge. Thank you. So, all right. Anything else? If not, we'll go ahead and finish up here. Thank you guys so much for joining me today. And, we want to make sure that, as we engage our clients, that we are being as encouraging and supportive as possible. Remember, like David mentioned, you are sometimes a salesperson for the benefits of therapy. But we also want to be cheerleaders and encouragers. We want to make sure that we're recognizing that the people that we are working with are truly people. And some of us have found ourselves in those spots too, in the client seat of therapy. And think about how you would want someone to engage with you in that. So, thanks again for joining me today. I appreciate it. I'm going to send out this resource to you guys, or we'll post it in CareLogic. You'll get an email that'll let you know. And I hope everybody has a wonderful weekend. Thanks so much.